Hey, here we are, Machu Picchu. Once again for a Facebook Live for all of our folks all around the world. And, we've been talking about it. This is really significant all around the world. There's sites that are just not being understood appropriately. They are kind of like putting all of the different cultures together in describing it as one, as if, the Incas went around and terraced up to like top of mountains and they moved 40-ton to 60-ton boulder, up and down valleys and so on. And there's just clearly a big distinction between the Inca repairs that they did to these temple sites that they found, just like the Egyptian repairs that they did to the temple site they found in Egypt. And this is occurring all around the world. And in general, the archaeological community has been associating, these megalithic construction to the later people that found these sites and repaired them, and it's really a big error, and it's very distinct. It's very easy to make the identification. Yesterday we were talking to the guides here, and as we started to describe this to the guides very rapidly, they start to realize that they start to get that it was a big distinction between the two cultures. They could see the difference between the cultures that were there that, repaired some of the site and some of the biggest, like the big megalithic stones and the way that they've been arranged together. Now, in the archaeological community, typically they say, well, there was lower, class citizen that had like less well-constructed stuff, and then higher class citizen that had better constructed stuff. But the thing is that, the better constructed stuff is so well constructed that even today with all of our technology, we can construct it. So it doesn't really matter which class they were. They were not able to construct something like that, arranging, 40-ton boulders with perfect precision. And, some of the sites in Machu Picchu, specifically like the Temple of the Sun, is such a good example because you can see these amazingly well arranged stones where you couldn't put a hair in between the meetings of the stones, but then you can see as well like the stones matched to the bedstone, so that there's a combination of terraforming the bedstone and the constructions on top of it, and it's just so perfect. It's incredible, and it's nothing we could do today. No way, no how. With all of our technology, it's not just the size of the stone, it's the precision at which the stones have been arranged. And then, of course, there's some size that are like so enormous, like 120-ton stone, like in the middle over there. And, as we saw at Seksek Muaman, the same type of stone, but like very large, 160, 120-ton boulders, all arranged perfectly. So all these things just make it clear the difference between Inca repairs and pre-cataclysmic megalithic constructions. And it's really time that historians, archaeologists start changing the story, because the story is vastly different from, a bunch of Incas pulling on vine ropes and terraforming a huge portion of their country and placing incredibly complex sites together with like huge boulder, huge stones. So it really, started to, it's time. It's time for the story to change. It's time for us to recover the true history of the earth. And clearly there was a very advanced civilization that was there, most likely pre-cataclysm, that is pre-10,000 to 12,000 years ago. And that civilization perished or moved on. And what we see is the remnants of it that were repaired by the later civilizations all around the world. And this is very, very obvious when you look at the distinction between the qualities of construction. And it's really time for us to get a new understanding of the history of humanity this way.
Did you see major differences between the way that the construction is here compared to in Egypt last year?
Yeah, you can see a lot of similarities. The way the stones are cut, the way they're arranged, the precisions of the cut, the tool marks you can see everywhere, these knobs that are sticking off the stone, the way the stones are bulging, all this is supportive of the idea that whatever technology it was allowing the stone to become very ionized, maybe in a cold plasma state even when they were being placed, so that they could be shaped exactly so that they could match the way they match like a puzzle, and be arranged the way they are arranged. So yeah.
So it could have been a global civilization, and it was the same civilization that we're seeing exhibited around the world because they had ships and they could cruise.
Yeah, so it sounds outrageous.
It does to most humans on the planet at this time. It sounds outrageous.
It sounds outrageous that you would have a civilization that had gravity control, that had ships that could go around the world 12,000 years ago. However, from the result of the evidence, there's not 20 million different conclusions you can come to. And the evidence is overwhelming all around the world. And it really is time for the archaeological community to get with it, and stop hiding, and actually look at the evidence for real, and stop repeating. If you're a student in archaeology and you're continuing to repeat what it was said in the 30s and 40s, it's really time for a different story, because the evidence is overwhelming all around the world. And so it sounds outrageous, of course. However, the latest sensor of our our galaxy show that there is at least 40 billion planets in the Golden Knock region, that is in the inhabitable region of their star, in our galaxy alone. So the idea that we're alone in the universe, the idea that we're the most advanced civilization, that we have the most advanced knowledge, and that there is nobody that has been able to come and visit us, is maybe erroneous, and fundamentally erroneous, and the evidence points to the contrary. And so, although it might be hard to believe, there's a lot of evidence for it. There's a lot of evidence all around the world for it. In ancient times, ancient temples that are left for us to ponder about, but as well in modern times. So, that's where we're at.
And you look at the standard archaeology view, and they say that these guys were moving these rocks up and down the mountains, and we just hiked. And saw how hard it is to just even walk without carrying anything.
Yeah, exactly. We just went up Montagna. Took us a few hours. It's grueling, steep hike, and to imagine that people would be going up and down like these mountains readily with thousands, millions of stones billions of tons of material would be very difficult. So, it's not conceivable. It's not feasible. And so, but if you have ships and you are able to terraform the planet very easily, then you might, terraform a region like this to cultivate for the world, and be able to export, because you have, just like we export today, using planes, but in this case, using technology that's a little more advanced. So you can, terraform in altitude, you can, make all these plateaus, you can move very large rocks from faraway quarries across valleys, build temples in very high altitude and so on. And you don't have any of the issues you would have if we were trying to do that today with our technology, because you have gravity control. And it's really what's required to be able to explain some of the evidence that's present, not only in Peru, of course, in Egypt, but in many other places, Baalbek, many other places around the world. It demands this level of explanation. It demands breaking, the preconceived ideas and actually coming up with something very much more, feasible for this time.
And when you explained all this to the guides at Machu Picchu yesterday, what was their reaction?
In general, very, very positive. Even, the archaeologists, because they've looked at it for a very long time, and it doesn't make sense to them neither. They look at it, you can clearly see the difference between megalithic, incredible rocks, position and arrangement, and, Inca repair. And so it's clearly a much different culture, a much different technique, a much more evolved way of building walls and temples. And, for them to think, for them it was hard, although they're saying it every day, it's hard to swallow, because it's like you got Inca stuff that is clearly, manageable size, put together like in dry stacks that like you would expect from civilization that are not so evolved. And then, and then right beside it, you have stuff that we can reproduce with all of our technology today. And like the two just don't match. So when I start to talk to them about that, they start to go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, the Incas found this place and then repaired it the best they could with the material that was available in this region. And that, starts to say something vastly different about our world.
Jonathan on the feed is asking, what kind of technology do you think that they would have had to be able to plasmify rock and, move them with precision like that?
Yeah, well, it's not obvious, we don't have it today, otherwise we would be doing it, right? So, we don't construct buildings with 30-ton boulders or 100-ton boulder or 200-ton boulder, or in Egypt, like 1,000-ton boulder, right? We don't build anything using that kind of stuff because we don't have the technology to do that. But we're getting close to the understanding of physics that might lead us to this. And so speculatively, you could say that if you have a civilization that has learned to control gravity, right? So has learned to curve space-time, has learned to generate high energy fields in the structure of space-time, that they may be able to create an energy level in a region of space so high that the composition of a stone would become like a cold plasma, a very highly energized, ionized state of that stone, and it would have the consistency of marshmallow consistency or clay, consistency, and then and it would be somewhat hot, but not like in a place in a position like in a magma configuration. Still, something malleable, and then the energy level would make it levitate, so you could place it where you want it and then mold it the way you want it. And that might be why these knobs are there. And definitely you can see it bulges. So, when you're placing one on top of the other, they bulge because they're soft, right? And then you remove the energy level off the stone, and then they solidify the way they are, and they almost fuse together, one beside each other. And you see that over and over again. You see as well the consistency of the rock being unusual. That is, we know approximately where these rocks came from, and in these region the rocks have veins and they have all kinds of imperfections in them. But when you actually look at the ones that were used to build the walls, you can see that they actually have a very homogeneous consistency. You don't see huge veins crossing the boulders and so on. They're almost like perfectly consistent, and that may be because the molecules in the rocks were altered. They flowed a little bit when they were highly ionized, when they were in a state of a cold plasma.
And what about the rocks that, like the quarries at the top of the mountain? Like the standard model says that they were just dragging them down from the top of the mountain and then into the valley and then back up again.
Yeah, so there's sites like in the Sacred Valley where like 50 to 60 ton boulders. Those are huge. People don't necessarily realize what that means, how big that is, and how difficult it is to move something that big and so on. And to just say, oh yeah, and then the quarry for those places, the quarry is literally across the valley, another mountain top. Like it was quarried at the top of a mountain. And so like to take a 50-ton boulder down a mountain, across a valley, across a river, back up another mountain to go and build a building is not only not practical, but it's completely inconceivable with today's technology. Never mind, bronze tools and vine ropes. It just doesn't happen. It really doesn't. So, so it is difficult to swallow, but it really is clear evidence that there was something very powerful, very advanced that was at play when these buildings were built, and it was certainly not Inca people or dynastic Egyptian that were dragging 200-ton boulders and stacking them on top of each other.
And where do you want to go next? What other sites are you looking forward to checking out?
Well, we're gonna go to Rapa Nui, Easter Island. We're gonna go to Chichen Itza. We're gonna go to Teotihuacan. Many sites. There's so many sites. All around the world, India, Middle East. There's so much stuff to go and see. So we have a lot to cover, but as well, we're gonna try to do some archaeology. We are doing some archaeology at the Resonance Science Foundation, using laboratories in the U.S. to do some, carbon dating, to look at some artifacts all around the world. So we're building a case from direct observation, but as well from testing and good science that's being done on biological samples, but as well artifacts and so on all around the world. Artifacts and biological samples that that are out of place, that don't work in the classical description and archaeology of the standard model. And and there's more and more emerging. It's like mounting evidence. It's remarkable, and you can't really ignore it. And it's been ignored. I mean, it's literally been swept under the carpet by archaeologists, by museums, and so on. And it's like put in the back, on the back shelves, and never looked at again because it just doesn't work. Well, we're pulling that out. The evidence is emerging from many different sources all around the world, and so the Resident Science Foundation is not just about going around the world and experiencing those sites in terms of the archaeology, but it's as well doing testing and appropriate science to be able to see exactly get the new story right.
So we're going to go to Mexico next fall, the 3rd annual Resonance Academy Delegate Gathering?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be, but Mexico is definitely one of the destinations that's coming right up with Rapa Nui. And, going to look at the evidence over there too, which is emerging. I mean, not only is it, these famous sites that we're at right now, but is that, even here, this was only found in 1911, I believe. And there was villages right around it. Nobody knew this was up here. Just 2 years ago, they found a new site right near here, on the other side of a mountain. And, so these sites in the jungle everywhere that are being discovered in Mexico, in Bolivia, all over the place. So, we're gonna as well attempt to take smaller groups on sites that are not so well known and that are more recently discovered in Guatemala and so on, as well as to see the stuff before it gets altered by, the different organizations that conserve those sites, which is a good thing. But we're gonna do some of our own exploration.
I just want to let you know there's a lot of people saying really positive, cool stuff on the feed and saying hello from all over the world.
Right on.
And wishing you well.
Thank you.
And very insightful comments, cheerleading on. So thank you everybody for watching. It's
Thank
awesome
you.
To be here. Here, let me just show you some of our folks here. Hey, say hey everybody.
Down below.
We're cruising around. Yeah, there's a bunch of us. There's 150 of us, as a matter of fact. Here, I'll go.
Hey.
There's 150 of us around the world.
Thank you, Jamie.
And come with us to Mexico next year, and to Rapa Nui in the spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And
And Maura, thank you for organizing. This is Maura. She worked tirelessly for a year to organize this, and it's been fabulous.
Lots more to come. They're gonna get better and better and better.
Yeah, thanks so much, Maura.
Yeah, and it makes a difference, us going to these sites and making, with these groups and going to the sites and bringing the energy in so that we can kind of connect with the energy, connect the sites. All of our, we're there with our little resonating crystal, bringing the energy up and bringing the different connections between the sites together, right? Instead of the separation that has been made, because this is this culture, this is this culture, it's no, this is one culture, this is one humanity, and it's us coming together and unifying, not just unified physics, but unifying humanity.
Pre-cataclysm, pre-flood, right? If there was a major cataclysm, whether it was a comet or a meteor or a sun flare, if there was a lot of ice, it got flash vaporized, and then the oceans rose 300 or 400 feet in a matter of days or weeks.
Yeah, and this is in the culture of all these peoples all around the world. Over 300 cultures describe this. And none of the Inca culture said that they built this stuff. They always say that the sun gods built this stuff and that they came upon it.
So the archaeologists are ignoring what the actual people said.
Right.
They say, oh, isn't that cute? They made up myths and legends about the sun gods.
Right.
And it's like, you guys, those were people.
And it's basically a bunch of white men that came in the 40s and 30s and came up with these theories, and they wrote them down, and they were famous archaeologists. So like all the rest, the archaeologists have been repeating the same thing over and over. And if you're trying to get a PhD in archaeology and you say anything else than what they said, you get in trouble.
Sounds exactly like physics.
Yeah, same problem. And that's not science. It really isn't. Science is not about repeating what the people previously said. Science is about like looking at the evidence and coming to your own conclusion about what really happened over here. Right. I get hot under the collar because it's like remarkable that they call us irrational. And we're looking at the evidence, and we're actually, doing the math. And
hard data.
Yeah, hard data. And it's like, wait, the math doesn't add up. You don't put 2,300,000 stone in a perfect geometric structure, with 100,000 slaves. It doesn't happen.
That describes perfectly the relationship of the Earth and the Moon and the meter and the cubit and the kilometer and the mile and the nautical mile.
And it just goes on, and that's exactly on the Earth. So that it bisects the Earth where there's the most land mass, and it just goes on.
The speed of light in air and in the and in a vacuum, described in different ways.
Phi, pi,
Euler,
E. It just goes on and on and on to all the representation you see, and the techniques are completely incredible, unbelievable, and from here to Egypt, to everywhere around the world. It's everywhere, and it's very consistent. That is, you can see the same kind of techniques, you can see the same kind of attention to details, and the same kind of constants, mathematical constants that are being repeated. Clearly this was a global effort.
Global civilization that was wiped out by multiple catastrophes, and then the waters rose and everybody wrote about the flood. Hundreds of cultures wrote about the flood.
Yeah, and they didn't just keep that in their traditions, generation after generation after generation for thousands of years for no reason. They were trying to tell something to the people of the future, what happened in the past, that there was these sun gods, right, that came from the stars. This is exactly how they describe them. It's even in the Sumerian plates.
If you want it to last more than a few hundred or thousand years, if you want it to last 1,000,000 years or something, you build it out of rock, because the rock is not going to change that much in millions of years.
That's right, and you build it out of huge boulders.
Might as well.
Yeah, might as well.
Because it's so easy to move them.
Yeah, if you have gravity control.
Yeah.
But you ain't pulling on 40-ton boulders across valleys.
You mean that
some serious alpacas and
dinosaur alpacas? Is
right?
that how they do?
I don't know, but they weren't doing the job. I guarantee they weren't doing the job. So it's it's time to get real, folks. It just is. It's time to get real. I know, it's what's in the books, but the books are wrong, and if you're doing a PhD in archaeology, come on, get real. And, don't just go with the status quo. Look at the evidence. Look at the evidence and go and see it for yourself. And then go from there. Or come with us. We'll show you the evidence.
And now the physics backs up these stories, because as you'll see with Nassim's equations and the papers that are coming out, that it is possible to get energy directly from the structure of space.
Right.
And when you do that, you have an unlimited amount of energy, because that space is not just not empty, it's completely filled with energy.
Right.
At the Planck scale.
Yeah, and these stones, they're made out of protons and neutrons and electrons, and they have huge amount of energy. You just gotta know how to tap into them so that you can rearrange them. And what we're calling matter is just a state of the space itself. When you realize that, and the equations are unequivocally, precise about this. And they're the most precise predictions on Earth to this day. Okay? And it clearly tells you that matter is just a state of the space.
It's plasma that cooled down.
Right.
And so you bring it back to plasma again. And
Right.
it's like, oh, cool. Now I'm like 99.8% of the rest of the universe.
Right.
And you can do whatever you want now.
Yeah, you can, and you have enough energy in a centimeter cube of space, in the structure of space itself, to alter anything you want. Right? So it's not like you can imagine like, oh my God, the amount of energy it would take to ionize or to plasmify a huge rock. Because you're not like making the energy over there with a nuclear power plant or a hydroelectric plant.
That's why you don't find tools.
Right.
You don't find factories.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
you don't need tools.
Right.
The energy's in the space. You're not like, there's no wires coming out of your device
Right.
to do this job.
You're producing the energy in the structure of the space itself.
By creating a vortex.
You're
Or
extracting the energy that's already there.
by
Right?
spinning the field.
By spinning the field, by structuring space where space was before unstructured. And so you can alter the space so that the matter starts behaving differently. You can alter the space, it's feasible from these equations, that you can actually alter the space itself so that you can produce matter right out of the space. And although that might sound like crazy, we're already doing it even in the mainstream with like the dynamical Casimir effect, where we just oscillate the space fast enough and then photons come flying out, right out of the vacuum.
Where are those photons coming? Standard model guys? Like,
Well, that's the
what's
thing.
their answer to that?
Well-
how do they account for?
Well, that's the
They
thing.
renormalized the vacuum density because they didn't like the ether because it was too magical. But
right.
it's like the data's there, the energy's there.
Yeah, actually, there's a great conference that was given in 2017 about the ether by a Nobel Prize winner in physics. And it's a great conference that people should watch by Wilczek. Probably one of the best physicists on the planet today. And he literally told us that we're children of the ether. I mean, it's
And how did
straight
how
up.
did the academic world take that?
It's remarkable. I mean, this is a Nobel Prize winner, very well-respected physicist that clearly says you can't have a theory of physics without the ether, without energy in the vacuum.
Which is what
And-
Einstein said.
As well.
And they don't even like Einstein saying that. Like they kind of
Right. But so in general, the conference has been ignored as far as I can tell. I'm just puzzled. Why is it so hard for people to imagine that? I mean, there's electromagnetic waves everywhere in the space right now. There's infrared, there's ultraviolet, there's radio waves, there's microwaves. There's like all
we got a
this
cell
stuff.
tower up there, thankfully. That's why we're on Facebook Live.
Right, and I mean, and basically, the idea that the space is empty is like clearly incorrect, and it's not only not empty, it's almost infinitely full of electromagnetic fluctuations.
So is it going to take a young PhD student to be able to flip the paradigm by being able to write a paper on this stuff?
Well,
how does the paradigm
you
actually
mean in
show?
archaeology or in physics?
In physics.
In physics, it's been very
Well,
difficult.
it's the same with archaeology, right?
I'm not gonna name names, but there's a student in physics that was trying to write a PhD on my equations.
On your work.
On my work, and there was an intervention that was done between his professors and his family. An intervention. They grabbed him. They brought him into a mental institution.
What?
Yeah. They and they drugged him for almost 3 weeks until he agreed to sign a paper saying that he would never talk about my work and he would change his optic on his PhD to something
But
else.
it's mathematical equations, and the numbers are the numbers, right? And you can show these equations to a physicist and say, show me the miscalculation. Where's the error?
Right.
Right?
You can.
And there's no error.
No,
in the math.
Well, you know, there's some errors in my earlier papers, but that's normal in physics. You know, they're not fundamental errors.
You're not off by an order of magnitude.
No, but certainly in the holographic mass solution, quantum gravity and the holographic mass solution, and all the papers that follows, there is no errors. It's clean. You know, top physicists in the world publish papers and have little errors there and there. These papers are completely clean. We output the mass, the proton, more precisely than any other theory on Earth. The electron extremely precisely. All the table of elements. I mean, and now we're publishing a paper applying these theory to the universal size, and we get the critical mass with the strong, dark matter, dark energy, baryonic matter. The whole thing comes out, boom, just right, with the same equation from the quantum to the universal size. It's just right. At every point of the stuff, it's just right. So yeah, I mean, the math is good, but the institutions are terrified because, of course, like, it would change all of the current paradigms of physics. You know, the standard model goes away.
They've been looking for dark matter for decades.
Right.
And they spent a lot of money on that.
Right.
And they want return on their investment.
Right, exactly. And they love to
Unfortunately,
build,
that's how it goes.
you know, devices that cause. All of a sudden, if there's no such thing as dark matter, and, you know...
Because it was just the vacuum energy in the space itself?
Right, because it's just the vacuum energy in a galaxy that's not being accounted for. So, of course, when they look at the matter in a galaxy...
They're looking at the baryonic matter.
They're looking at the baryonic matter, that is the normal matter we see, and they say, oh, wow, you know, the galaxy photoelectric effect that really kind of birthed quantum theory with Max Planck.
That's what they gave him the Nobel for?
And that's what they gave him the Nobel
He
Prize
didn't even
for.
get the Nobel for relativity.
For no, absolutely not.
Yeah, because that was way too out there.
That was way too out there. But the thing is that, you know, after all this, he like that, you know, basically they use an interferometer and they tried to see if they could see the ether dragging behind the rotation of the Earth. But the assumption is that they would see that at such a small resolution that
So like the shearing between protons that are black holes inside of atoms?
like frame dragging.